Okay, today we're going to find percent of a number. Find percent of a number using decimals. Find percent of a number using decimals. Okay, here's what it looks like when it's all done. There's many ways to find percent of a number. Today we'll just use decimals. Okay, so let's do a little review first. Little review. So I have a D and a letter P, and I have the word two spaces. And I repeat that. The only difference is, notice we have an arrow, so if I want to go from D decimal to P percent, decimal to percent, I have to move the decimal two spaces. What does that look like? So if I have a decimal, I move it over 1, 2 spaces to go from decimal to percent. What about going, okay, I have a D, decimal, and percent, but what if you want to go percent to a decimal? Right? You want to go this direction. Then that means I need to move the decimal. So if here's a decimal, I would move it 1, 2 spaces. That's what it means. And the reason why I like to keep it DP like this is because think of the alphabet. D comes before the letter P. Decimal to percent, you want to go this direction, you move the decimal this way, 2 spaces. If you want to go percent to decimal, think of the alphabet, you want to go this direction, 2 spaces. Let's do a couple of examples. Okay, we'll do 3 examples. 0.04, 0.4, and 1.4. You want to change them from a decimal to a percent. So in order to do that, I move the decimal over 2 spaces, right? This way. So I would go 1, 2. So the decimal is now right there. So it is 4. You can put a decimal there if you want to. Percent. How about the next one? Move it over 2 spaces. If you move it over 2 spaces, 1, you're going to have to put a 0 in there for a placeholder. So the answer would be 40%, 40%. If you want to put a decimal, you can. And the other one, 1.4, again, move the decimal over 2 spaces, 1, 2. You need a placeholder in there. So the answer is 140%. You can, again, you can put a decimal if you wish. And that's how you go from decimal to a percent. Go to the right. Okay, let's try 3 more examples. This time let's go from a percent to a decimal. A percent to a decimal. So we have 8%, 80%, and 180%. Now, if you want to, you could notice that the decimal is always to the right of a number, right? So like, you know, there's the decimal. here's a decimal. There's a decimal. Even though it's not written, there's the decimal. So we need to move it 2 spaces, but going to the left. From P to D, percent to decimals. 2 spaces to the left. So if that's the decimal, you would move it 2 spaces. 1, 2. Notice you need a space holder there. So the decimal moved from there to here, and you need a space holder. So it is 0.08. All right, how about the next one? You want to move the decimal over 2 spaces. It's going to be right in front of the 8, 0.8. Now you can say 0.80 if you wish. But most people just drop off the zeros to the right of the number. All right, and the last one there, hopefully you can tell, you move it over 2 spaces, there's a decimal, 1, 2, it's 1.8. And again, if you wish, you can write 1.80, but I'm just going to say 1.8. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you now. Just a quick review. Then I'm just going to kind of, I don't know, separate mine a little bit, like so. Sometimes I like to use little clouds, just kind of make things stand out. Those squiggly lines. Something just to separate it. Make it look a little organized. And this is about as artistic as I get. Okay, now let's get to what we want to do, which is to find percent of a number. To find percent of a number, now this is a pound symbol. I just use that, I know, hashtag, whatever, but I just use that to represent number. To find percent of a number, now I'm going to use a little shortcut. Remember, I'm going to use our symbols we've been using. Change percent to decimal, then multiply. Okay, and I should say both numbers. And I'm going to, again, abbreviate numbers. Put a little S at the end. All right, so change percent to decimal, change percent to decimal, I should probably put a comma, then multiply both numbers. And that will be your answer. That's it. Let's see an example of that. So here's our example. What is 25% of 80? What is 25% of 80? That's our question. Problem. What is 25% of 80? All right, and notice what we said up here, which I think I will just separate. We want to change percent to a decimal. This is a percentage. Make it into a decimal. So we move 2 spaces to the left. Right? There's a decimal right there. So this becomes point. Move it over 2 spaces. This becomes 0.25. Right? 0.25 times, of means times, because we're going to multiply the 2 numbers. Change it to a decimal, multiply the 2 numbers. 0.25. I'm going to put a dot for times. It's in the center though, up high. It's not a decimal point. Of 80. So it's 0.25 times 80. Now I'm going to write to the side, even though I know we all have calculators, so it would be this: 80 times 0.25. See that? You can calculate that out. Now if you have a phone though, you would just calculate this. And I will write that down. So if you're doing it by hand, you would do it this way: 0.25 times 80. If you're using a calculator, you would do it this way: 0.25 times 80 equals, and you would get your answer. Let me do it old school with you, just to refresh your memory. 5 times 0, 5 times 8 is 40. Put a space holder in there. 2 times 0, 0. 2 times 8, 16. All right, we add all that up. We get 0, 0, 10, so carry the 1, 2. Now remember, you have to move the decimal over 2 spaces when you're dealing with decimals like this. So if I was moving over 2 spaces, you would see the answer is 20. The answer is 20. You got to remember to move the decimal over 2 spaces. But see, that's what we did with that's what we did over here. We moved the decimal over 2 spaces. All right, well anyways, actually the calculator does it all for you. That is how we find percent of a number using a calculator, using decimals.